everyone. Welcome to the Wilson Center. Since this is being viewed elsewhere in Washington and indeed around the world, simply permit me to say one word about the Woodrow Wilson Center. We are the nation's official memorial to President Wilson, the nation's 28th president. We seek to commemorate President Wilson's twin concerns of sound scholarship and sound public policy. I think you will see an example of that today as we help launch a new book on the making of the Pakistani bomb. This is a work of sound scholarship, but it quite obviously speaks to issues of current interest and indeed vital interest. So I think our event today gives us another opportunity to fulfill our mission as serving as something of a bridge between the world of the scholar and the world of the policymaker. Before I introduce our speaker, let me simply thank Joe Pilot on my left. Joe and the Los Alamos National Labs are a longtime sponsor of this series of monthly luncheons, along with the Wilson Center's Non-Proliferation Forum, headed by my colleague, I think, in the back of the room, Rob Litvak. Rob, as always, and Joe, as always, it's wonderful to be working with both of you. And Joe, we're very appreciative of your role in making this whole series possible. Before we turn to Feroz, would you like to say anything?
Just let me offer a welcome from the Los Alamos National Laboratory and from me personally. This topic is an extraordinary one. We think about some of the fundamental challenges of nuclear security and nuclear stability in the context of the Pakistani bomb, but we need to remember as well that Pakistan's effort to develop a nuclear weapon, its success in that effort and its deployment of nuclear weapons fundamentally changed the way we think about the non-proliferation efforts and the non-proliferation regime. There was a rethinking of proliferation pathways prior to Pakistan's successful effort to obtain a bomb. People looked at the plutonium pathway rather than the HAU pathway, almost exclusively. I think that in terms of the challenges that the Pakistani effort set up in terms of nuclear export controls and the nuclear supplier group have been very significant as well. I think that clearly, given this impact, the history was critical. It wasn't there until this book, and we welcome hearing Feroz speak about it. So.
Thanks, Joe. Hosting this event today is a source of pleasure for a number of reasons, but not the least of which is Feroz Khan is a member of the Wilson Center, and indeed some of the early work on this book was undertaken here at the Wilson Center. So Feroz, in a way, we're coming full circle. We certainly welcome you back to the Wilson Center. Feroz Khan spent a distinguished 30 years in the Pakistani army, rising to the rank of brigadier. He commanded combat units in Kashmir and on the Siachen Glacier during his career. He was Director of Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs in the Strategic Plans Division in the Ministry of Defense, in which position he spent a great deal of time on the very issues about which he now writes. He was a 2001-2002 fellow here at the Wilson Center. He is currently a lecturer in the Department of National Security Affairs, Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. Froze, again, welcome back to the center, and we're eager to hear about your book.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Bob, Joe, Rob Litwick. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my honor to speak here at Woodrow Wilson Center again, almost after a decade. And I'm really overwhelmed by the presence of you all, ladies and gentlemen, for this talk that truly honors this book and the work, and actually Woodrow Wilson Center. In fact, this book began here on this very building in 2001 when I reported here on 4th of September 2001. But 1 year after 1 week after my arrival here, the world changed. So I became a commodity for a very different reason here after 9/11. And this is the second time I'm seeing such an overwhelming response of people attending, because the last talk that I gave of this kind was on 14th September 2001, and the room was flooding. I think probably it was the same room here. Thank you all for coming. I believe this subject is very important. You might want to ask the question as to why should you be reading this book? I mean, there are books on nuclear issues that have been written, but what is it so different about this particular book? And obviously, I believe this is what you want me to speak about, why this book is important. Well, for a wide variety of reasons, this book is important because usually you don't write on anything unless there's something controversial, something exciting, or probably something that has not been known. I believe that the story of Pakistan nuclear weapons program is not known. There's a lot of writing on Pakistani nuclear program, but the wholesome story was not known. And this work actually began in the book as it shapes now. Actually, the work began here, but the manner in which this book was shaped was in 2004, after the infamous A.Q. Khan crisis that hit the world. The Pakistani government at the time was eager that their story should also come out. And I, along with my colleague Peter Lavoie, who was also part of the Naval Postgraduate School back then, we both were, as co-authors, approached the Pakistani government and asked that unless your whole holistic account of the Pakistani nuclear program comes out, it will be only viewed with one lens alone, and that is the A.Q. Khan proliferation network. There are many books that have come out viewing Pakistani nuclear program through only that one lens. And therefore, this book is slightly different because it gives you an insight into the program from a different lens. And that lens I'll explain in a bit. People think that this is an insider's account, and I like to clarify, this is not quite an insider's account. I was an insider at some point, but this account is not an insider's account. It has a lot of elements that could only have been written by somebody who has been associated with the program, as I was. But it is based on interviews from those people who were true insiders. It is based on the information that those people were willing to provide, and the Pakistani government was willing to provide access to. But this is not the whole story, because every program is shrouded in secrecy. There are operational elements that must be protected. And so there are elements in this book that has not been revealed and probably cannot be revealed about any country's nuclear program, especially if it is so active and operational. So to that extent, it is important to know that what is not in this book as well. Because so much has been written on A.Q. Khan network, that's one element that is not being focused of this book. It is not a book on proliferation. It's a book about the motivation of a state. And essentially, what compelled them to do this? Why is it so important that a country believes that nuclear weapons is sine qua non to its national survivability? And then so much of disinformation about the program was already out, and not necessarily because of the controversy of Yaqub Khan, but disinformation generally, both from here as well as in Pakistan. The disinformation in Pakistan was essentially because there were claims and competing claims. One event, different stories, different narration. One achievement, many fathers. Setbacks, problems, nobody owns up. This is the story. So it becomes very difficult to wade through all those challenges. But more importantly, this is a book which talks about the human aspect of the Pakistan story, how much really went into this program, how deep the motivation developed at a time, and I'll explain in a while, at a time when there was no consensus about which pathway to go. So there is a lot about how much sacrifices was paid in terms of political opportunity costs, in terms of economic costs, military security. And another aspect that has not been hitherto focused, and I think it's more for people of Pakistan to know, that the amount of sacrifices in the field of science and technology that the country had to suffer. Suffered because it decided to go nuclear weapons pathway. Many scientists, engineers, physicists, metallurgists, who were aspirants, young people in the 60s and the 70s, were benefiting from the Atoms for Peace program that we talked about here, were denied. It's been almost 40 years, many young aspirants now don't have that privilege and that the elders had in the 50s and the 60s. So it's a cost to pay to maintain the program. So all this story actually weaves through in this book, you know. So what was the lens that I'm trying to, show this story out? In one way, the story of Pakistan acquiring nuclear weapon is not very different from its predecessors, which is to say the 5 nuclear weapon states, and particularly India, Israel, and China, are the 3 countries that preceded Pakistani nuclear weapons program, and the story seems to be somewhat identical. States and societies, they develop a strategic belief in themselves based on their historical experiences that they would never suffer humiliation again. And this never again theme resonates in those countries, particularly the 3 outlier countries in the non-proliferation regime, which was Israel, India, and Pakistan, and before that, China. The account from John Lewis on China and the bomb talks about this never again theme, how they were abandoned by the Soviet Union and humiliated by the United States in the 50s. That was at the bedrock of the Chinese nuclear program. India's humiliating defeat in 1962 was at the bedrock of why peaceful India's program turned nuclear. And 2 years later, when the Chinese conducted the 64 test, that became into a resolve. Pakistani story is the same. In 71, the humiliating defeat, and in 74, the nuclear test turned that reluctance into resolve. Now, at this period, when in the early 70s, the Pakistani and Israeli thinking is almost analogous. In the mid-60s, as you read Israeli account, again, the Israeli motive is, again, never again the Holocaust, we all know that. But the debate within Israel was whether they should go full throttle nuclear or not. And as the Israeli account, as we know, there was a similar sort of a debate within Pakistan in the mid-60s. And I write it in terms of what I call nuclear enthusiasts and nuclear cautionist, and pretty much the debate was on the similar lines. The nuclear cautionists were the ones who said, it's not right for us to go nuclear now. It's not right for us to go because we're going to lose more and we're going to gain less in the process. And that caution was because the country was on the right side of the political arena in the world at the time. It was receiving the best of the military aid in the mid-60s. The Bretton Woods systems was providing Pakistani economy to float like no other country. They were growing like 6 to 8% at the time. The Atoms for Peace was providing them the peaceful use of nuclear energy. The scientists, the technicians were going all over the world to the topmost universities in the world, and they're getting trained, what I call the soft technological base that was being developed in the mid-60s. So nobody wanted to turn this happy period by doing something, some hanky-panky that would derail that every benefit that was there. And within the country was ruled by Field Marshal Ayub Khan at the time. Now, usually the theory is that military people push the nuclear program. They are the military, are the guy, they are the hawks. But ironically, it was Ayub Khan who was himself leading this charge of the caution. He did not want the country to go that pathway because it was really progressing well at the time. And in fact, in his heart, leadership does matter. In his heart of heart, he was never convinced that nuclear weapons was a good thing. In his diaries that I explored later on, he wrote, "This is wasteful. This is purposeless. I mean, this has really given mankind something that it can destroy itself." Usually you don't hear such things from military leaders, especially who have done coups and given the Pakistani history, but he was one of the very cautious sort of a person who did that and led this lobby. Well, the other lobby that was the enthusiast was led by the way, a civilian, and that was actually Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and the Pakistani Foreign Office, where this whole brainchild that you convert this weapon program now or it'll be never. And that was in the mid-60s when they were debating that if the non-proliferation regime comes into place, this availability of technology will no longer be there. And therefore, you will be having more steeper. They lost faith in the alliance with the United States as a result of 1965 war. And in fact, the decision of 1965 war was indeed a very turning point in Pakistan because that contributed to this caution and enthusiast debate at the same time, because everything was going so well for Pakistan until they decided to do 65 war, and then things started falling apart from then onwards till to date. It's a slippery slope. The Pakistan went from that point onwards. So the enthusiast argued that before the technology shuts down, and they were looking at what was going on in neighboring India, no other country has contributed to Pakistan nuclear program than India. And the whole book tells you how they did that. So when they looked at India, they said, look, they are converting this peaceful program and we are watching what is going on, do it now. And Ayub Khan would not agree to that. And they would say that, the alliance is not going to have any benefits. The erosion of the military will be there because US had embargoed both India and Pakistan at the time. And they said, this is going to go down and down. But more importantly, that when you're focused on this big picture, this big geopolitical picture and the regional picture, you tend to lose something from within the country. And that is the country was slipping from within, under its feet from the very beginning, actually. And I have tried to write this book not in a bland nuclear story alone, but actually tried to blend the history of the country, the domestic challenges, the idiosyncrasies of the personalities, the regional challenges, the non-proliferation challenges, and how alliance politics, something which you're all familiar with the history. This is something very close to each one of you who are listening, and you have known this history for the past 50 years. This is the life of a nation, how it evolved in some of those stories that you're very well familiar with, whether it begins from the 1950s crisis. But one thing that was going on from beneath Pakistani was that it was never a country that was, finding ways and pathways to become a cohesive nation state. And I'm not shy of actually explaining what was going on in the country at the time. It was in the very triangular contest of a state, nation state, as we know in the Westphalian sense, and ethnicity on the other hand, and the religious problems on the other hand. This triangular tension of the state was actually bursting it from the very beginning. So I began the story in 1953, time frame 6 years later, that, okay, you got what you got, but then there was internal fighting, They wanted to declare one sect, the Ahmadi sect, as a non-Muslim. And then the nation came into a serious identity crisis. So that is how I begin by writing these three themes of the book, that one was the this never again theme, but the other was that the state is struggling with national identity. And when you acquire nuclear weapons, that becomes the source of national identity itself. And many states acquired that. This is so specific to the Pakistani case in particular. Now, when they started the program, the country was dismembered. Half of the country had gone. Half of the technicians gone, scientists gone, population gone. That was Bangladesh. Now you're dealing with the people who are left after that. When the program started by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, that we need to do it now, or again, it was going nowhere until India conducted the 74 test. I said that India contributed maximum to Pakistan's policy and changes. Well, that 74 test changed any intentions into a full-fledged motivated program, and there was no turning back. In many ways, as Joe, you said in your introduction, it was that event that pushed the non-proliferation regime in the shape as we know now. And in fact, in many ways, the US Non-Proliferation Act that evolved by the late 70s was also evolved as a result of reaction into what happened in South Asia. After India's test, how Pakistanis responded, and how US tried its level best first to dissuade Pakistan. And that's a fascinating story for most of you to know how they tried to dissuade, and how the Pakistanis were, and how the non-proliferation regime, the supplier group and all, started evolving. But remember that when Pakistan was trying to do this, it was a very different world at the time. Sometimes we tend to forget that. And the different world at the time was that it had many other compatriots at the time. South Africa, Argentina, Brazil. Even China and France had not joined the NPT at the time when this was going on. And they tried to very different tack altogether, that the whole world was focused that they will go through the same route, which is the plutonium, well-known plutonium route, and they were trying to get a reprocessing plant from France, which United States was really vociferously opposing. But nobody could at the time think that the highly enriched uranium could be the pathway that a country with no developed facility could really do that. Probably it's the first country that actually thought of converting the highly enriched uranium technology purely for the purpose of nuclear weapons. And that really slipped to the radar. And I must say that as you read this book, and I'm speaking at a lot of other places as well, there is this belief, a sort of a myth. One myth that explodes, the book explored a lot of myths, and I don't say that others have said that. One of the myths is that this was purely a stolen program. This was purely illegitimate, stolen, and they could not have done it. It is only partly true, because the acquisition of nuclear HEU technology in the mid-70s was not an easy feat to do that. But the other myth that I come across is that as if people who are non-Western are dud. They don't have brains. I hope that this book will at least tell you how much resolve and how much effort goes into not one individual, hundreds of them. When there's a directive and there is an incentive, they'll do that. They can innovate. They can design. They may be lacking hardware, but they don't lack in brains. This I can tell you, and this not goes for Pakistan. It goes for India. It goes for China. It goes for North Korea and Iran, for that matter. Please do not consider these countries to be brain dead. They're smart enough to do it. And this will tell you how they did it. So it is not just stealing technology, that it is the preserve of one society or civilization. It goes beyond that. And today, we are 70 years into the nuclear age. This is not something that cannot be acquired. It can be done, and if there are challenges, that can be overcome. I use a terminology here, which is a Punjabi word here, and maybe others can translate better than me. There's something called jugaad. And this was said to me by the Pakistani Atomic Energy Commission chief that, you can't find a perfect, sophisticated technical solutions. You're going to innovate. You're going to find a way to do it. You can't find a sophisticated system to run. Use a bicycle chain to run it. You're going to do it. And this is how they were doing it. The story of how the centrifuges were spun in the very initial days and how they were exploding right on their faces is of interest, because even if you get designs, even if you get blueprints, even if you get some hardware, even if you get some broken centrifuges, It's not easy to just put it together and cascade and do that. So the story of Pakistan in the 70s, how they were doing with snakes and hard and underground basement, it's a very painful story for those people how they did it. But that indicates the resolve they did. And not only that, they had one bomb design that was being taught about. And I know this is maybe many of the people could not write everything in the book. The Pakistani bomb designers were designing not one bomb but several bombs, several bomb designs. And right from the mid-70s onwards, we're talking about 2013 now, I'm talking about 40 years back. They were working on multiple designs, implosion designs, gun method designs, designs to mount on. It was very challenging. And I'm not indicating that it happened overnight. It took them 20 years to really come up with a deliverable warhead system. And it was not until mid-90s that they could do so. So these are the stories that are come, which I believe has not come out before. And probably some people may be upset about this. But when you look into the bigger theme of this book, from an international relations theoretical perspective, the lens that you want to see is not necessarily that states will do because of security or realism lens alone, but actually an intervening lens of what is the strategic culture, how it evolves, how they evolve into strategic beliefs that they have to do this or else it's now or never. And those beliefs were based on historical experiences and a fundamental belief that the world will stop us no matter what. And they would stop us because we are Muslims. And that was a major driving force behind Pakistani nuclear program. The obstacles that were placed by the non-proliferation regime was against this country primarily because it was a Muslim country. That drove and continues to drive, I would say, even today. So the story from reluctance to resolve is the story, but now, after the nuclear test was conducted, and let me tell you the final part, and I'll be happy to take the question and answer sessions here. There was no template with the Pakistanis in '98, and now I'm involved in the program, so I can now almost say with my own observation. We didn't know what to do next because the date of May 1998 was not chosen by Pakistan. That was chosen by New Delhi. They were not prepared to come out and face the international opprobrium. The economic situation was bad. That's what eating grass is all about. There are people sitting in this room who are very well aware about the Pakistani economic situation at the time when the bomb was exploded. There was hardly any foreign exchange reserves in the country at the time. And after the bomb, in fact, there was a capital flight outside the country as well. So really, that was a moment to eat grass because, but they didn't know what to do next, how to mount international diplomacy. Intense and tremendous amount of pressure that came from United States. First, to stop Pakistan not to go that way. And second was how to deal with the sanctions, because sanctions was not, hurting India, but not hurting India as much as it was hurting Pakistan at the time in '98 and '99. And then, as the history of Pakistan goes, there are self-inflicted wounds on Pakistan. Within 1 year, they decided to do Kargil. So that was the second one mistake they did, despite being under sanctions, and that results into the perennial civil-military crisis and the coup in '99. Now what to do next? How to operationalize this deterrent? You have to keep it in the basement back. Once you're out, you can't keep it back. Should we move forward? Rely on highly enriched uranium. What about delivery systems? At the time, they barely had few solid fuels systems to deliver and an aircraft method to deliver. Now, as we speak 10 years later, they have an assortment of delivery systems from cruise missiles to tactical nuclear weapons, through large number of ballistic missiles, aircraft systems, air-to-ground launch, ground-to-ground, and soon to be sea-based nuclear deterrent. Now, these opens up sort of a lot of Pandora box for implication for strategic stability, as Joseph was saying in his remarks. And obviously, what motivates them in the direction that's going now? What explains the direction in which Pakistani minimum deterrence is actually not appearing minimum to the rest of the world, but they are holding on to the nuclear program, clinging it to them, when all other things are actually around them is not a very happy picture. Almost all of you know about that, about Pakistan's social problems, its political problems, its economic problems. So in the end, I'm not shy of saying the fact that in of itself, nuclear weapons cannot do, it's not a panacea for national security, unless and until other elements of national power match up with this achievement and capability. Nuclear weapons could soon become a liability rather than a strength, a cumulative strength. So if the Pakistani internal political system, Pakistani economic situation, the bane of Pakistan's history does not mend itself, nuclear weapons will not be able to save it. It may provide one level of deterrence, of prevention, of total war, which it has, but beyond that, it will not be able to provide Pakistan the security that it is seeking for. More importantly now, it's 15 years that the people of Pakistan must determine two pathways, which way they want to take the country, whether it will be a more moderate country or whether there will be a radical takeover. Both the possibilities and symptoms are available in the country, as any observer can see. It could go either way. And it is really a very important defining moment for the people of Pakistan to determine which way the nuclear-armed Pakistan will head in the days ahead to come, particularly after the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and the new sort of paradigm changes that is happening at the system level within the next 2 to 3 years. That is a very important message for the people of Pakistan to realize. And secondly, within the Pakistani, the way the nuclear program has evolved in the last 15 years, the management system that has evolved. First of all, it was the first 10 years was more or less a military unified command system, a military-dominated system. You could evolve a command and control system because there was so much unity. And by the way, the country was also making some good economic progress in the 2005 and 2006, much more coherent country. But regrettably, in the last 5 years, we see, the same old story of Pakistan's history. I don't have to elaborate much on what has been going on in the country for the last 5 years, but what has happened in the process that, in the process of democracy, institutions have become much more important. Institutions and individuals have become much more important with regards to the management of nuclear capability. It's about time that Pakistan people, if this book can do any one thing in the my final words, is for the people of Pakistan to embrace their story, to know that they are the one who paid the political, economic, and even the military and other costs. They have to own this up now. To date, I have not seen one debate in Pakistani parliament in past 5 years on the nuclear issue. Not one debate. The president of Pakistan was part of the head of the Pakistani National Command Authority. He decided to abdicate himself from that responsibility. He gave it to the prime minister because this country's system changed from presidential power to the prime minister power. But everybody who knows Pakistan knows that the power lies with the president. But he is not a member of the National Command Authority. One less civilian oversight. The Pakistani parliament, the Pakistani civil society, the Pakistani civilian institutions, these are the people who must now own up as to the direction of the nuclear policy and where they want to take nuclear Pakistan. It cannot be left to one organization alone. They're doing a tremendous job, I can tell you. I'm not trying to criticize my former organization, but there's a limit to their job. They can convert it into operational deterrent. They can do nuclear security. They have converted into an organizational command and control system. They can do that. Good custodians, good management. Beyond that, where the policy, where the direction of the nuclear program should head, that rests with the civilian government and the civilian and the people of Pakistan to own this up. I do not see that there is much debate within the civilian community if eating grass can trigger that amongst the Pakistani political systems, I think I might have done some service to the country. I'll stop here, sir.
Froze asked me how long he should speak, and I suggested 30 minutes. I will note that I think it's 30 minutes to the second. That's pretty impressive. This is an important book. It's a controversial book. Everyone who is in this room is interested in the topic, and I would submit that probably each of you should get a copy of this book. Not coincidentally, you can get copies right outside the door here, and I encourage you to stop and get one on your way out. Froze, I've got a list of about a dozen questions that your comments have prompted. The good news for you and for everyone else is I'm only going to ask one of those dozen. But I want to push you a little bit on the utility of sanctions as a tool for blocking the production of nuclear weapons by countries who would acquire a nuclear arsenal. If my memory serves me, and I'm not sure it does, but I think the United States sanctioned Pakistan twice in the 1970s and once again in 1990 on nuclear-related issues. There are other sanctions as well, but I think there are 3 sets of sanctions for nuclear activities. Obviously, the sanctions didn't keep Pakistan from acquiring nuclear capability. So the question really is now not on Pakistan, but going forward. If one accepts the proposition that the world is safer if not every country and every group acquires a nuclear capability, do you think that sanctions have really demonstrated that they are ineffective in stopping further countries from acquiring nuclear capability? I'm talking right now, of course, of North Korea and Iran, but one can envision other would-be nuclear powers in the years to come as well. So based upon the Pakistan example, what would you have to say about sanctions as a useful tool in blocking the spread of nuclear weapons?
Bob, thank you for your question. In part, the book does answer this aspect of the question. I think the sanction did hurt Pakistan. The sanction of Carter administration sanction in 1970s badly hurt Pakistan at the time. But at the same time, and so was the 1990 and 1998, all 3 sanctions that I'm talking about did hurt Pakistan very badly. And that's eating grass's implication is that there's a price to pay. And I mentioned earlier on that not just the sanctions, but the penalties in the shape of deprivation, in the shape that younger people now cannot come to Western universities and get the opportunities, etc. There are many other opportunities cost that the state has to pay. But the manner in which the sanctions and the geopolitics evolved in the case of Pakistan is more peculiar than probably can be applied to other countries. In this case, the more the sanctions were applied, the more the resolve grew. So the sanction has to be used in a manner where it does not convert into resolve. Say, we're going to eat grass, we're going to do it. Now, if that is the theme, the countries are going to do it. But an important factor, which is in Pakistan's case, and I cannot say that whether this is the case will be the case with Iran or North Korea, was that it was a geopolitically or strategically important country. So it found a way out to find a means to get out of the sanctions, and geopolitical shifts helped Pakistan to do so. So the sanction of the 1970s, late 70s, turned on its head when it became a secondary issue after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And as the story tells, that's where the whole highly enriched uranium program and the delivery system worked. And then again, so geopolitically important countries find a way out to overcome the sanctions. And that's the story of Pakistan. As simple as that.
Joe, did you want to ask a question? Okay. Aziz.
Good to see you, Feroz. Aziz Hani with India.
Sorry, Aziz. Let us get a microphone because people hearing this on webcast can't hear you.
Aziz Hanifa, editor of India Abroad. Latching on to some of your concluding remarks that it's about time that the people of Pakistan should take ownership of the nuclear program, and fast forwarding to today with Pakistan's constraints in economics, political, security, etc., and of course the constant paranoia of the so-called jihadists taking hold or getting a hold of Pakistan's nuclear weapons. How sustained is the program today? And moreover, is it sustainable? And a quick follow-up in terms of some of your technical expertise. There was a report in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists that Pakistan may be developing lighter warheads because it may be easier to attach to ballistic missiles. Can you comment on that, the veracity of that?
The program is very much sustainable. And it is being very sort of professionally managed. What I implied by saying, and thank you for your question actually, what I implied by saying that the people of Pakistan must take over the ownership of the program is in a broader sense. You know, it's one thing to say we are a nuclear-armed country. Yeah, I mean, it's a rhetorical way to say nuclear-armed country, but you know, when we look at the overall picture as to what is happening in Balochistan, what is happening in Sindh, what is happening elsewhere, and how the economy, how the governance system is going on, that doesn't look like a nuclear-armed country's behavior. You know, I mean, nuclear-armed country is supposed to have a much more robust system within of politics and economics and social system. It seems to me that the lack of governance in the country is that's what I'm pointing out. They should own up that, you know, if you're a nuclear-armed country, then this is all your responsibility. It's not simply just to keep on saying, you know, oh, we are nuclear-armed, you know. So that's what I was alluding to, you know. Again, I made it very clear that I do not see that there is any serious debate within the civil societies in Pakistan. It's only being dominated by military-dominated institutions, and they lead the pathway. And so far, they have done a tremendous job of actually, you know, converting a demonstrated deterrence into an operational deterrent. But what next? This is beyond the capacity of the organization to look into the nuclear policy matters, and this has to be done in the Pakistani parliament and etc. That's what I'm alluding to. Every program is sustainable to a certain point. There are technical, there are financial, there are resource constraints. Of course, I mean, eventually there are. So it's not run away as much, you know. For example, you know, there will be a limit to how much uranium ore can be produced. That could be itself a constraining factor. A resource itself could be a constraining factor. Your second question about lighter warheads, I don't know why Bulletin Atomic Scientists have said now. They've been making light warheads for 20 years now, because any warhead that is mountable on short-range ballistic missile systems are supposed to be a lighter warhead, and particularly since they demonstrated Nasser about 2 years ago. So that indicates that they have not just lighter warhead but compact designs of small implosion designs. That's pretty much an advanced technology.
General Khan, pleasure to hear your lecture.
Let me ask everybody to introduce themselves and identify themselves.
My name is Vijay Sazwal with Kashmir Forum. You mentioned Zulfikar Bhutto as the architect of the program, and I have no reason to say he wasn't. But he was also the architect of the relationship with China. And, you know, in terms of the program, there's always been this feeling, and I have not read the book, though I purchased it, that in terms of the production of the HEU-based weapon and the delivery system, Pakistan relied quite heavily on China and North Korea. Would you comment on that, sir?
No, that's not true. Pakistan did not rely heavily on China. In fact, the Pakistani centrifuge program was a Western technology, and the Chinese were in constant denial of Western technology. They had no idea how a centrifuge is run. So actually, it's the other way around. The Chinese learned from Pakistan, if at all. And then again, you know, about the myth about the Chinese. Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned here and there in the book, and I've talked to a lot of people, scientists. What do you really think was? Again, this is much more exaggerated here. it just undermines that, these people don't know anything to do. When there are technical hurdles, sometimes, there's not one single country in the world that has not transformed some sort of knowledge to another country. This is the whole nuclear age. Think about from 40s down to this. There are certain glitches of technological nature where the Chinese helped, and these are all publicly known documents. For example, if the centrifuges are not running with perfect speed, and some ring magnets are placed, that makes the efficiency of so if that kind of a thing happened in the 90s, these are known facts now. But there's a lot more associated with the Chinese help in the Pakistani program than what it is. And actually, the book actually sort of, breaks that canard that is not true. I mean, that's only partly true to the extent, Bhutto was the architect of Pakistan's foreign policy in the 60s, if you will. But Pakistan-China relations predates that. It begins in a little earlier period as well. So I have no doubt in mentioning that the political father of the Pakistani bomb was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. It was his personality, it was his vision that he put together everything together. Sooner or later, it might have happened with somebody else to do so, but the manner in which he put it together and he led the nation in the 70s is a remarkable story. But again, sir, I can again tell you, he would not have been able to do that had India not conducted the 74 test. That would have still been sort of a hedging here, hedging there, sort of a thing. But that changed. And that provided him the opportunity to really lead it up from the front.
I'm assuming this is working. Jim Bell, St. John's College, Annapolis. I have it on. I've heard that in times of crisis, the control of the use of nuclear weapons in the Pakistani army devolves to field commanders. Given your comment about the National Command Authority the president removing himself from that, is that authority of the field commanders still extant, or do you know if the field commanders have the authority in times of crisis to decide to use nuclear weapons?
No, they do not. And let me tell you very explicitly, the Pakistan National Command Authority exercises centralized control, even of tactical nuclear weapons, including Nasser. Let me tell you very unexplicitly, without any mincing words. The National Command Authority exercises control of the entire nuclear arsenals, including tactical nuclear weapons. Now that actually raises more question about whether that is efficient or not. That's another debate that we can get into. And the National Command Authority, including all the ministers, all the army chiefs, are the ones who are authorized to make any changes into the structure of the nuclear weapons, whether it is in storage to delivery and for deployment into the forward area, much less the use. And to date, to the best of my knowledge, the Pakistanis have not deployed, which means they have not mated nuclear weapons with the delivery system in any of the crises. In fact, Aziz Hanifa asked me this question many, many years ago about the Kargil crisis. That is false. They did not do so. And they have not done so far. But that doesn't mean that they won't do it in the future. But actually that raises the question about field commanders. The conventional force commanders do not have any command responsibility of the nuclear weapons. That is done through a separate chain of command, through the NCA, through the Strategic Force Command, and to the battlefield. So this is a much more complex sort of a thing, but the answer to your question is no, they don't.
My name is Amanullah Khan, and I live in the United States over 4 decades. You mentioned about the Pakistani nuclear program was looked through lens, and I can say that lens was focused on prejudice and unfairness, because if some of you remember, when Pakistan was developing that bomb, it was criticized as it'll be Islamic bomb. But we can see today that I am proud of it. The Pakistani bomb is the most peaceful bomb because we have peace with India. India brought its military twice on our borders, but there was no war because of bomb. Even former Prime Minister of India threatened Pakistan to use nuclear power. But Pakistan dealt with it peacefully. So what do you have to say about on those issues? Thank you.
Has the Pakistani bomb been a force for peace in the subcontinent?
Well, I think I alluded to some of in my remarks. I did say that there was this feeling within the community, the scientific community, and within the Pakistani that they were being discriminated against, and all these obstacles are being placed because it's an Islamic country. I mean, I did say that in my remarks, and the book comes out very clearly about whether it's an Islamic bomb or an ideological bomb. That goes into a very different kind of a debate. The bomb is still a Pakistani bomb. It is a national security of Pakistan's perception bomb. It is not an ideological bomb in that sense. I can say that with confidence that this is not the case in Pakistan. However, by the way, just for the record, this idea that this is an Islamic bomb came from the same person who started the program. It was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto who actually coined this term when he said that if Hindus' civilization can have bomb, if communists can have the bomb, if Christians can have the bomb, if Jews can have the bomb, why not the Islamic country? These are Bhutto's words. And the fact is that Pakistan is an Islamic country, and if a country that acquires a bomb, you want to acquire it that way, well, why should you apologize? It's a Muslim country in the possession of a bomb, as simple as that. But the connotation that this is an ideological bomb with a different sort of a role for the Islamic Ummah does not resonate in the mainstream thinking in Pakistani strategic community, to my knowledge. It does resonate of this kind in certain Islamic parties that have indicated to this extent, like providing an extended deterrence or those kind of a thing. And that's only one party that I can cite, and I have cited in the book, and that is Jamaat-e-Islami. That's one party that talked about this bomb being an Ummah's bomb. Nobody else has talked about other than Jamaat-e-Islami, and Senator Khurshid, to be specific, to tell you who said that.
Let's go to the back of the room. There's a hand all the way in the very back. Wait till we get a microphone to you, please.
My name is Nishkam Agarwal. I'm an independent researcher. My question really is, does the Pakistani establishment consider India a Hindu country or as a secular country? And how does that play into the equation in Pakistani decision making?
I don't have to answer that. You're turning history back now. You're turning the clock of the history back to pre-1947 days. Culturally, India and Pakistan are the same civilization and same lot. You go to average Pakistani house, everything that Indian food, Indian culture is resonating in every household. The people of Pakistan have had enough of 60 years of rivalry. They stopped thinking in terms of Hindus and Sikhs anymore. I can tell you with confidence that mostly people, there are enclaves in Pakistan who think in these terms, but I think a lot has changed in the last 60 years now. One good news that comes out from the region until this line of control issue started off was that there was a lot of bonhomie between India and Pakistan. People don't talk in these Hindu and Muslim terms anymore. India has a secular constitution, we all know about that, but India is a Hindu-dominated country, and there are enclaves as much as in Pakistan, in India as well, which you are very well aware, who do not think who think of India in Hindus terms, and you know that who they are, and they are the one who matter. And similarly, there are enclaves in Pakistan who thinks Pakistan in a very different, theological country. So that's where I leave it. But thank God the mainstream does not think on these terms now. Another question.
We got so many people. Let's let other people have a chance first. Gentleman here and then over here. We got a microphone coming to you.
Thank you, General. Justin Anderson, SAIC. And my question is follow up on your concluding remarks, which is I wonder if you could speculate if, in fact, your book could catalyze a dialogue within Pakistani civil society about the nuclear program. Do you have any thoughts about where that might lead? Would that lead to a different perception on use of resources for the program? Would it lead to different thinking on nuclear deterrence? Or would, in fact, it reaffirm a status quo, but one that was more civilian in basis rather than just military? Thank you.
Well, my remark was, I think, was clearly indicating that the civil society in Pakistan, the civilian government, the parliament, they cannot absolve themselves as if nuclear is a taboo subject anymore. They have to talk about this. And I'm alluding to the fact that there's a role of the military, there's a role of organizations to have strategy, to develop tactics, to deliver operational preparedness, to have a robust command system which gets into technicalities. But in the realm of nuclear policy, it has to be the top leadership in the country that should be held responsible. That's my message. I don't know how it's going to translate, but I think this debate must be now on in Pakistan as to what it means for us to be a nuclear power in the world. I don't see that debate. What are the consequences of nuclear war if it happens? I have not seen any debate. Pretty much not even in India about this kind of a thing. So it's not just Pakistan alone. I think India is also not having much debate on these issues. But it's important, and I am just alluding, I'm as a scholar. That's all.
Hello, sir. Shelton Williams, president of the Osgood Center for International Studies. About 45 years ago, I wrote a book called U.S., India, and the Bomb. And listening to you reminded me of a lot of things that I did in that research. But I also thought of myself as a person many years ago and maybe some wisdom I've acquired over the years. Following on this question, you, as a member of the Pakistani military, what were your thoughts about these issues and how have you grown, and what do you intend to do in Pakistan as opposed to in the United States to bring that wisdom beyond your book in terms of policy to civil society in Pakistan?
Well, you see, at the time when I was in service, we had just conducted the nuclear test and there was a military coup in the country. And so we were actually thinking of how to translate this demonstrated capability into operational deterrent forces, into how to translate that, how to convert this into diplomacy, and how to move along. But there was a lot of difficulties in doing so. 9/11 did change the environment to an extent that Pakistan did become an important country back. And it helped in many ways to harness the relationship back. Why I mention about the civil society now, because it's 15 years now. It takes a while for states and societies to now start adopting to these things. In the initial part, it was understood that, because the program was shrouded so much in secrecy for 30 years in the past, so how long will this debate continue to be put under the carpet? That's what I'm indicating. There are secrecies. And sir, may I also indicate, when the Cold War was ending, there was a book that came here. It was called Managing Nuclear Operations. It came from Brookings. The first paragraph of that book says that, even after all in the United States, the first paragraph said that this is all shrouded in secrecy. We don't know much about nuclear operations. We know about nuclear weapons. We know about its capability. We know about the impact. We even know about nuclear policies, but we don't know what nuclear operations are. And that is Ashton Carter's book, famous book, Managing Nuclear Operations. So for a country which is going through so much of, trepidations and so many problems in and around itself, to be really, truly transparent about nuclear matters, Pakistanis have been far more remarkably transparent than they should have been in my assessment. So this book is not about to unveil the transparency, but actually also to protect that countries do need to protect their ability.
Thank you. Dave Rogers, independent scholar. Getting back a little bit to this Islamic bomb canard, to what degree did the Pakistanis assist the Iranians in their nuclear technology developments and weapons work?
These facts were established in several other writings, not necessarily in part of my book, but I would refer to you the Institute of Strategic Studies London dossier that talks about this particular fact. The assistance provided to the Iranians was done by AQ Khan's office in Dubai. When Pakistani government refused to provide anything beyond IAEA mandated technological training in the Pakistani PINSTEC, Pakistani Nuclear Science and Technology. The request was made in 1986 by then President Khamenei, who is now the spiritual leader, who was the president of Iran, to President Ziaul-Haq. And he was politely declined that we can only provide you assistance which is open and transparent under the IAEA program. And it was not just for Iran, but for other countries as well. But then the Iranian Atomic Energy Commission people started contacting AQ Khan network in Dubai. And it's well established that some old P1 centrifuges went, followed by some samples of the new P2 centrifuges that went to Iran. And that was all that is known publicly now until the whistle was blown in 2003 and 4. So when the Natanz was actually disclosed in 2003 and 4, the Pakistanis were asked to actually acknowledge and help the international community whether this was the case. And the Pakistani did send some centrifuges to IAEA to verify that the aluminum-based centrifuges were there. So it was a very sort of a rudimentary sort of a cooperation that went across, and that too because the network was running amok, and that's another story as to how this was going on. So other than that, there is not any active Iranian-Pakistani cooperation to the best of my knowledge.
Here. Come around the other way.
Howard Moreland, private citizen. You mentioned two types of fission weapon designs that the Pakistanis have. The standard nuclear weapon design for major nuclear powers is the two-stage radiation implosion thermonuclear weapon, which runs about 100 times more powerful for similar size and weight. Does Pakistan have any of these bombs, and is it, if not, is it working toward acquiring them?
To my knowledge, no, they're not working on thermonuclear weapons. They're not. To the best of my knowledge, they're not. They're happy with the basic fission designs. At best, boosted fission. That's about all that they would be able to be happy with. I don't see that, to my knowledge, there is any thermonuclear program. It's a very, very colossal amount of experiment and financial undertaking, and it's very challenging. And that would require a series of nuclear tests in my assessment and my judgment. I'm not a technical person, but this much knowledge I do have, that if they want to go the thermonuclear path, they'll be requiring a lot of nuclear explosive testing to do so. That environment is not permissive, and neither, the nature of the program as it is heading is going in that direction. So,
Other people over here. Okay, back over
Thanks.
here.
Whoop. Can I go ahead and ask my question? or do
Oh,
you want
okay,
to
yeah.
send it somewhere?
Sorry, I didn't see you.
Oh, no worries. Philip Blake, Department of Defense, asking in a personal capacity. Nuclear and conventional insecurity are clearly intermingled in the Pakistani case as motivations, and I wonder if you can disaggregate them, at least to some extent analytically. I guess the extreme version of the question is, if you think of the counterfactual of India-Pakistan relations being similar, but India not going down the nuclear path, do you think that Pakistan would have acted very differently in its own nuclear behavior?
well, it is really counterfactual to say that I think that Pakistan at best would have had a hedging capability because the program started immediately after the 1971 war, but with full knowledge that the Indians were going ahead of their program, particularly after 64. So it's really too counterfactual to say whether the genesis of the program was purely to offset the conventional balance alone. But yes, I mean, the fundamental rationale for going was to offset that conventional balance. And I think I've written elsewhere, and partly in this book as well, it's one thing to sort of conceptualize that nuclear weapons can truly be equalizer to conventional imbalance, but in reality it becomes very, very challenging. I mean, look at where Pakistan had to really move on. They found that the spectrum of the deterrence was not complete until they introduced a tactical nuclear weapons, calling it full spectrum deterrence, indicating that the idea that despite being nuclear armed, South Asia, the idea of fighting and winning a war has not gone away from South Asia. I mean, regardless, I mean, there are terrible consequences of a nuclear war, and there are terrible things that are happening in South Asia which should not happen. For example, terrorist attack, etc., in India. And I'm not trying to trivialize India's grievances, such attacks, such like Mumbai and all. But the fact is that the idea that you can fight a limited war against a nuclear armed country because it is conventionally weak and terminate that war on your own terms and conditions without consequences of a nuclear war is not a responsible policy. It risks far more than thinkers in New Delhi are really contemplating. So this nexus of conventional and nuclear is a very, very dangerous sort of a pathway that South Asia has embarked since it conducted nuclear test. And going forward, I'll be speaking this afternoon in Stimson Center about strategic restraint regime that was coined as early as 98, just after the test, that was tying down this interlocking conflict resolution, conventional restraint, and nuclear restraint. Unless these three things happen simultaneously together, it's very difficult to really be assured that that South Asian have strategic stability with a great deal of assurance. At this point, I cannot say that for sure.
Okay, we have time for one. There's an answer, a question back here, and then another one back there. These will probably be the last two.
Thank you. Elaine Grossman from National Journal. Sir, I wonder if you could address the concern inside Pakistan that the United States at some point might militarily intervene and snatch Pakistan's nuclear weapons and the effect that that has had on the nuclear program and policies.
I've not heard any official statement to that effect, so I won't put it on the book. But the event after May 2nd, 2011, in which the US forces could stealthily move into Pakistan without their knowledge, has had a profound impact on Pakistani security thinking, and particularly in a country that also holds a large number of classified programs. And those classified programs, particularly nuclear program, is the one which United States disagrees with, has always disagreed for 40 years, does affect their thinking. I think I've written elsewhere, I can refer to you an article that I wrote in Arms Control Today in 2009, and that was much before this thing happened. But I was alluding to that any nuclear program must look into the physical threat to the program, which means outside invasions, must look into insider threat, must look into outsider threat. A combination of both these are the very basic nuclear security regime. And that's true in this country, that's true in any other country. And Pakistani's nuclear security architecture has borrowed a lot of philosophical and conceptual thing thanks to the cooperation with the United States. A lot of ideas have come from here as to how things are managed in this country, and they've borrowed a lot and improved a great deal. So the nuclear security regime as they have evolved is pretty robust in the sense. But a country that is expected to focus on insider threat from terrorists, extremists, Al-Qaeda, on the one hand, and then finds that there are ideas and external countries also thinking on the same time. In fact, not more about Abbottabad, but it was the response that came from India as a result of that Abbottabad incident. We can also do the same. So obviously, you can think that anybody thinking in Islamabad will not leave this thing go unnoticed. So it became even more challenging for the nuclear security regime, the architects of those regimes, to not think on these lines. However, on a serious note, I do not think that the relation of United States and Pakistan has gone that terrible that people will start seriously thinking and taking this into account. Despite all the things that have happened in the past 2 years, US-Pakistan relations are back on the mend. So I don't think that this should be taken as a very serious threat in the threat matrix in Pakistan. But so I hope I've answered you as best as I can.
Okay, up the line.
Hi, Chris Clary from the Rand Corporation. First, people should buy the book. It's very, very good. I finished it this morning on the flight down from Boston, and it's you met your standard. You wanted to have something like Perkovich, something like Holloway, something like Cohen. I think you met it. It's very, very good. Question just on this theme we've been talking about for the last few minutes. As you look forward, is there a ceiling on how many nuclear weapons Pakistan requires? We probably have Pakistan probably has, as a round number, maybe 100 weapons now. 200, 300, 400, 500. The last chapter of the book focuses a lot on how much plutonium India has sort of lying around, which kind of makes me think that you think the ceiling could be quite high. Talks about ballistic missile defense, et cetera. But as you look in the next decade, would you say this is enough? You would tell General Kidwai and your old colleagues, okay, guys, let's cut it out.
I know. By the way, this is Christopher Clary, who's mentioned in the preface, and he has helped a lot in the research. And that's why he asked me the toughest question, you know. Very difficult to say how much is enough. But, you know, as an analyst, I can simply give you answer. It is not just the plutonium production that they calculate about India. This they have been doing so for always, all the time for 40 years. What is India's calculus in Pakistani mind? Not necessarily what calculus is here. But actually in the nature of the program that they have introduced, you mentioned ballistic missile defenses. I mentioned about cruise missiles. I mentioned about the introduction of tactical nuclear weapons. Now, if you truly want to deploy tactical nuclear weapons, so far it is considered to be a demonstrated capability rather than a deployed capability. Well, if that is the answer to India's cold start, if it can blunt India's armored forces attacking across the Pakistani border, then you need lots of tactical weapons, not few. And lots of tactical weapons means lots of plutonium. And that means more field security. That means more command and control problems. Gentlemen, sir, you asked about the question, the complications about pre-delegations and not. And then the idea that so many weapon systems with signatures would appear in the battlefield will really create another set of problems between conventional force command level and nuclear force command. That complicates the command control system, or whether pre-delegation is necessary or centralized control is enough. You opened a Pandora box here. These are the questions I raise and we all raise as analysts as to how do we respond to these implications of this. But so far it is still in a very nascent, very demonstrated stage. We know for fact that the two production reactors are there. The third one is coming, and the fourth one is also on visible. So 4 production reactors and a reprocessing capability will mean significant amount of plutonium production. So when I see all this happening, I don't know what to advise General Kidwai. You know, he won't take my advice.
All right, one last question. No, I don't. Okay, there's one last hand. This will be our last question.
Greg Thielman, Arms Control Association. Pakistan and Iran are neighbors. They're both Islamic states, and yet the two states have a very different declaratory policy on nuclear war. I wonder if you could comment on these two countries, both of whom have humiliations, both of whom have the capacity to develop nuclear weapons. Why is Iran today so different than what Bhutto was in the 1970s about the need for nuclear weapons and the morality of nuclear weapons?
Well, for one reason, you know, Iran and Pakistan are different countries in a sense that Iran was a signatory to the non-proliferation regime and Pakistan was never. So its intentions that it will not join this treaty bargain from the very beginning was quite clear. Iran has had a change of heart in the late 80s. And to the best, I mean, I'm not expert on Iran's thing, but to the best of my knowledge, it happened once Iranians suffered chemical weapons attack from Iraqis. That was the reason why they went. And that, I mean, there couldn't be a more humiliation than what they suffered at the hand of Saddam Hussein, including the use of chemical weapons. So that's where the motivation of Iran actually comes. And then the isolation that they have felt. You know, one of the themes of my book is international isolationism, if you know. When state and society feel isolated, they go for nuclear weapons. And that's the case of North Korea, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Libya. I mean, each of the countries were pariah countries. Each of them tried to go on nuclear weapons. Makes a case in point that if countries are pushed against the wall, they will develop the motivation of the kind. And I think this is one of the themes of my book. So in that sense, it is quite analogous, you know. But I don't think that Pakistani and Iranian nuclear policy could be identical, because in the case of Pakistan, there have been 3 wars with India, dismemberment of the country, with the same country, that also acquired nuclear weapons. I don't see Iranian neighbors of that kind of capability or that kind of history, other than what I mentioned about chemical weapons. So Iranians' motivation does not seem to be so much military security related, as much as it is more related towards deterrence of a larger kind of a geopolitical nature. And the implication of Iran going nuclear is far more severe, in my humble assessment, than the implication of Pakistani when they went nuclear back in the 70s. Today, Iranian going nuclear would mean the Middle East reaction will completely change. And so therefore, the implications are far more different than what it was. Yes, sir?
Well, on that less than cheery note, we will bring this to a conclusion. Feroz, you have given us ample demonstration reinforcing what we already knew, that this really is an important book, a book that anyone who's remotely interested in the topic ought to read. We commend you, particularly as a former Wilson Center Fellow, and if everyone here will join me in expressing our appreciation to Feroz. Our thanks again to Joe Pilot, to Los Alamos Labs, and to all of